podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AEye Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AEye Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AEye Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AEye Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendrick, joined as always by Mr. Carol Matchett. How are you, sir?
Sunny and spectacular.
Mr. Matchett is on his first holiday of many for this calendar year, so be jealous. Except for Tom James, who lives in Dubai and doesn't need to be jealous other than the fact that he needs a VPN to listen to Discord, which is hilarious. Carol Matchett, we are here today to discuss Arsenal in the FA Cup. However, it is only the FA Cup, so we don't really want to spend an hour on it. But we do have some questions that have come in our Discord channel for Scouted. So, a couple of these are a few weeks old, so apologies that we're only getting to them now. Isaac Gilding, we all know we need a six, a centre-back, a backup right-back, and maybe another left winger. But after that, what would be the next attacker, non-left-sided attacker that Liverpool should purchase, and where else is going to need refreshing after we've gone through the whole list of areas to address? I'll let you go with the attacker question. I will just say I think after that list, the next thing I'd probably look to refresh is a backup goalkeeper, because I do think Caoimhín Kelleher needs to move on for the good of his own career. Now, maybe that's Pitaluga or somebody can step up into that role. That's certainly the hope. But I do think that's an area that we'd need to look at, because there's no question Caoimhín has regressed from where he was 2 years ago.
Yes, and that will be a pretty natural occurrence when you only get to play 2-3 games a year sometime, which if your injuries fall in difficult moments or we go out of the cup early, that's obviously going to be the case for the backup goalkeeper at the minute. So I don't think it's a coincidence he was performing slightly better towards the end of that little run there that he had, because he had a few games in a row, a bit of rhythm. But yes, that will just be the case again, no doubt later on this year, no doubt towards the start of next season and so on when he doesn't get games again. I would also say that after all of those that you've just listed there are done, that's like a big team refresh still there that's happening. So I don't know over what kind of period of time this is going to be talking about. Like that could feasibly be 18 months or so before we get all of those in. So any attacker who's not a left winger, you're saying?
Basically, yeah. So would you look for a Mo backup / long-term successor? Would you look for a number 9 and potentially move on one of the options we have there? Would you look to bring in kind of a wild card that could play in a multitude of positions?
I think it's more likely that Salah might leave, let's say, this coming summer or the following one. So I would be very, very tempted to get myself the next goal scorer of the team, whether that is a central one or a right-sided one. If we assume that whenever the left-sided player comes in, that's going to be, another version of Diaz, which is like a ball carrier, lots of shots, but never going to be the key goal scorer of the team. Then I think that we need the option of having not just a replacement for Mo when he's not available, but just all the time, basically, because he could still be here another 3 years, of course, but things are going to fade from him technically and physically along the way at some point. I think it's quite important we have another alternative weapon in terms of our goal scoring. We've already seen we've got a few more options this year compared to the last few years because a few of our goal scorers from midfield now, a different type of centre forward, obviously. So I do think we've improved there. But if we lose Salah, that's both like creativity and lots of shots. And it's really important that we keep ourselves not predictable in both of those regards. So I don't know if you're going to push me for an actual name, but I think
No.
very limited who can do both of those things, to be honest.
Yeah, I do as well. Like I think we should be looking at replacing Luis Diaz over the next couple of windows. And if the Saudis were to come back in with a sizable offer, as they were rumored to be prepared to make in the summer, I wouldn't be against letting him leave and looking to bring in Pedro Neto to replace him on the left wing and having a proper outlet there who can beat players, create chances, and score goals. Now, he's not a big goal scorer, but he is a big-time chance creator, which would take away a lot of the burden of creativity off Mo, and it would spread the field for us a lot better as well, because we'd have a natural lefty holding width on the left and able to spread out a defence, rather than when Diaz plays, we tend to get very narrow in attack, and it makes it easier for defences at times to just collapse in. Whereas with Neto, he's going to isolate a right back, which is going to create space in the channel for Darwin, which in turn will pull a centre back towards him, which can create space for Mo coming in off the other side. I suppose one way to potentially mitigate Mo, assuming he stays, mitigate like the potential decline physically, might be to move him into the number 9 spot. So you'll still get the goals. You might get more goals because he'll be closer to goal and less will be demanded of him. And then you could look to bring in another, a right-sided player who can score and create. Who that might be, I don't know. Maybe someone like Michael Elise, if he continues to show an improvement in terms of goal scoring. Maybe it's Johan Bakayoko. Maybe it's someone else. But I like the fact that we have versatility in our front three, the group that we have there. We've seen Diaz play left and central, Darwin play central and left, Jota play central and left, Cody plays centre, plays left, can play off as well in the attacking midfield roles. I think we've seen Harvey play right side. I'm certain he could play left side if you need them to. Dominic can play both wide sides if you need him to. And Mo can play right side, obviously, but he can also play through the middle, and we have seen him play through the middle for us before to, pretty good success. I mean, that run he had in 18-19, he was very, very good through the middle and scored a ton of goals. And there's spells in games now where when changes are made, he ends up going through the middle and he does look a threat. And if he only needs to be able to create a bit of separation from a centre-back, he won't need to have the same blinding pace he used to have when he was required to run 20, 30 yards against a pacey fullback. So there's definitely ways we can manage Mo with any physical decline. And I think the biggest way will be to move him central, either as the main number 9 or as part of a 2 with Darwin, which would be my preference, because I'd love us to move to a 4-box-2, move Trent into midfield permanently, have Darwin and Mo up front, Alexis and Dominic as the 2 behind, and then Trent plus ball winner as a double pivot and play an actual back 4. That would be my preference. But it remains to be seen. I mean, we have other things we need to take care of first before we figure that out. The 6 is a big one. I think another centre-back is definitely going to be on the... As good as Jarrell Quansah has been, I still think we need another one to go with him, with Ibu, with Virgil. Because he's really young, Ibu is injury-prone, and Joe Gomez, I think we need him as a fullback option, and I think he looks more comfortable as a fullback option. So, I'd also then be looking at 2 new starting fullbacks, because I think Andy Robertson is getting close to the point where he's run his race. He has physically declined quite a bit, and technically he has declined massively. His decision-making has fallen off a cliff. So I'd be looking at 2 fullbacks, a centre back, and a 6 before I worry about the attack.
Just for an additional, not even really a narrowing down, just a first throw out of names, right? Obviously, Salah is multi-talented, and so you're not going to get too many people who can do both of what he can do. But if I give you the players in the top 5 leagues who, and this is obviously the most basic filtering out of names imaginable, the players who have given more key passes than him in league matches this season, and the players who have taken more shots than him, right? Just see if any of them immediately stand out as you go. And yes, I'd consider, or don't even want to hear them in the worst imaginable newspaper links ever, right? So key passes per game. So Salah is averaging 2.4 per 90, I should say. It's not per appearance, it's per 90 minutes. Above him, Leroy Sané.
I would take Leroy Sané. I've always been a huge fan, but I would want him as a left winger rather than a right winger. I think he's much better on the left.
Michael Olise.
Yeah, without question. Love Michael Olise.
I should add that these are players who have played right side of the attacking line this season. I'm not just going to give you every single player, so it's only like 8 or 9, but they've played right side.
That's fine.
Yeah,
unquestionably. Great left back for us.
Yeah. Matthias Sule of Frosinone.
Isn't he the kid that's owned by Juve?
I've not got a clue, mate. I've not seen Frosinone.
I'm almost certain he's the Argentine kid. Yeah, he looks very, very promising. Certainly would be interested in bringing him in. Yeah, he looks really promising.
20 years of age. Roman del Castillo of Brest.
I don't think I've seen him play. So I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I've seen him play, but there's a lot of set-piece stuff on there, so don't worry about that. Rafinha.
Barcelona Rafinha.
Rafinha.
Yeah, I'm a big Rafinha fan. I would take Rafinha.
It's going to depend on price, isn't it? Because he's not
like the world of light at Barca. Yeah. So yeah, I'd want him somewhere in that kind of 40 to 45 million kind of range. So I know that's a loss for them, but they overpaid for him, so that's their fault.
Second place on this list is Matteo Politano of Napoli.
I'm not a big fan. I've never been a big fan.
No, I'm in the same boat as you. And top of the pops, 4 key passes a game, Ousmane Dembele, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
We've been here before, Dave.
We've been here before with Ousmane. The talent is incredible. Talent-wise, he might be the most talented player in the world under the age of 26. Like, he genuinely might be the most naturally gifted player in the world under the age of 26. The issue for me is he's injury-prone, he's still inconsistent, and he's still immature. And I don't like the way he goes about his business off the field either. I don't like the way he forces things to suit his own desires when, in truth, he doesn't put forward the effort on the pitch to make him that kind of guy. Like, if Mo Salah turned around to Liverpool tomorrow and said, I want to go to Saudi and I'm not playing again, I'd be like, you know what? It's bad form, but he's earned that kind of right. When Ousmane Dembele turns around and tells Barcelona, I know you paid 110 million for me. I know I was dog shit for years. You gave me a prove-it contract when you probably shouldn't have. And I've had one decent season, during which I've also been inconsistent, had an injury, and been late for training 11 different times. But now I'm forcing a move to PSG. To him, I say, get to fuck. Away with you, son. I wouldn't want any part of him.
There you go. Right, so shots per game now, shots per 90 minutes now. Salah in league action is on 3.4, which puts him 8th in the top 5 leagues. Obviously, any repeat names here are going to be of particular interest because they are the few players who can do what Salah does in their respective leagues, their respective teams, and from his respective part of the pitch. Just below him, actually, is 3.3 Leroy Sané. So there you go.
Yeah.
He's back in. Domenico Berardi.
No, he's missed his chance for a big move. He's 29 now. He'll be 30 by the start of next season. I've always been a fan, but he's missed his chance. And to be fair, I don't think he ever wants to leave Sassuolo. I think he's very, very happy there.
Are you that person who has everything? The coolest merch and those must-have fan threads? Well, over at our Anfield Index shop, we've gone that extra mile when it comes to pimping up your Liverpool collection. From our popular range of bespoke design t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies and hats, to our signature edition mugs, prints and coasters, all provided with fast worldwide shipping. We have something for every red. We also stock official LFC merchandise and are licensed with the Premier League and UEFA to sell official iron-on shirt badges and sleeve patches. As a listener to this podcast, you can get 10% off everything with coupon code AIPRO10. Just head over to AnfieldIndex.shop or find us on Etsy by searching for Anfield Index.
Kingsley Coman.
I love the talent. The injuries would make it a no.
Michael Olise.
Yes, without question. I mean, what a player.
Verona's Cyril Ngonga. Sorry, I've never watched him. Don't know how to spell his name either.
He's Belgian. He's 23 or 24. I'm going to say no, but he is a talented player. But I feel like he's the type who'll be really good for like mid-table teams, but doesn't have what's needed above that.
A Wilf Zaha, are you saying?
A less talented Wilf Zaha.
Top three. 3.8 shots per 90. Daniel Malen.
No, I wouldn't touch him. He's having a better season this year for Dortmund, but he hasn't been good for them. Like, let's be honest. He's been there now for 3 years. He's never scored 10 goals in a league season. He's a 1-in-3 kind of player. This season, when it's his best season, he's a 1-in-3, 1-in-4 type of player. He gets the shots away. He doesn't have the conversion rate. He'd be a no for me.
Nicolas Gonzalez of Fiorentina.
I do really like Nicolas Gonzalez, but again, he's another one that's had quite a few injury issues. So at 25, he'll be 26 by the end of this season. I don't know that he's any better now than he was when he was at Stuttgart. And you look at the injuries, he's 25. He's got a page 2 on his transfer market injury list. And that's always a red flag for me at that age. So that's a no.
And finally, top of this particular is another repeat name, 4.3 shots per 90. But admittedly, fewer minutes than anybody else on this list by some distance, apart from Cyril from Verona. Rafinha.
I mean, the thing with Rafinha is he's pretty unplayable 1v1 when he's on his game. So he is going to beat a man and either play the pass or get a shot away. I would take him. I'm just looking though. He is 27.
27.
That's probably pushing past the point where we would make a move for him.
But he's only just turned 27
He is, to be fair, a couple of weeks ago.
So
I would take Rafinha and I would take Olise. I love Leroy Sané, but I mean, actually, what age is Leroy Sané? He's got to be 28.
He's 27 as well.
Yeah, he's 28 next week. This day next week, he's 28.
Yeah.
Here's
what we're going to do, Dave. The three names which came up in both lists is 50 million quid for each one of them. Leroy Sané.
I'm taking Olise. Yeah, it's not a question. I'm taking Michael Olise. He's the youngest. I think he's the one that would fit best into what we do. I think he's the best team player of the three. I think both Olise and Sané can get a little bit caught up in doing their own thing. I also think Olise is the best of the three on the right. I think the other two are both better on the left.
Now, here's the thing. We've narrowed this list down in the most unscientific way possible in the space of about 10 minutes. I guarantee you there are transfers out there that have happened basically along these lines.
Of course there is. I think Manchester United signed Aaron Wan-Bissaka, because they looked at right back success tackle rates and 1v1 success rate. And then they claimed that they'd looked at 204 other right backs because they put it in with minimum number of minutes played or whatever. And there was probably 205 players on the list. And Wan-Bissaka came out number one. That's how they ended up paying 50 million for him. They probably did similar with Harry Slabhead Maguire, where they looked at minimum number of minutes played, 700, and then, you know, most aerials and highest aerial success rate. Van Dijk was one. They were like, well, Liverpool probably won't sell him to us. Oh, there's Harry Maguire. That's 80 million. Van Dijk was 75. It's a couple of years later. Let's pay 80 million for him. This is how Manchester United have done their business for a decade.
On we go then. We've signed Palace's finest. What's next on the agenda?
Right. YNWA Foodie. Imagine you were Graham Souness when he was appointed into the Liverpool job. What do you think you would do differently at the time of appointment in terms of transfers, management, training, etc.? Well, the first thing I would have done is not completely alienate the dressing room by shoving senior players out the door, players that had won league titles for the club and were friends with the few that managed to stay. And then I would not have spent large sums of money on players like Neil Ruddock and Julian Dix because I was lost in the belief that Liverpool needed to get tougher, and thus signing minimally talented thugs was the way forward. And I also wouldn't have signed Dean Saunders or Paul Stewart or many of the other players that he signed.
That's quite a list of things you wouldn't have done.
Yeah.
What would be your first thing to do, though? Should we say, like, because he came in April, and obviously that's like a, you know, not a huge amount of time. I think there was still a bit of, you know, a few league games left. But let's say come the summer. So the summer is done. Liverpool finish second. So it's summer of 91, isn't it?
It is summer of 91. He took over on the 16th of April. So there's probably, I don't know, 7-8 games left. Well, the first thing I would have realised is that what the Liverpool team needed as Graham Souness was me. They needed me in the midfield. So I would have looked around for the closest thing to me, which was a young Irish midfielder playing for Nottingham Forest, who just had his first season with Forest, had scored 11 goals in 49 games, and I would have gone and gotten, and also been a really good ball winner. I would have gone and spent as much as it would have taken to get him, because he was the answer, and we were offered him, and Souness said no. And the next thing I would have done is had a look at my defence and realised that with Alan Hansen retiring, I needed someone to come in to be the leader of my defensive line. And while he had bad knees, he was still the best defender in England, and Aston Villa probably would have sold him, and I would have gone and got Paul McGrath. And that's what I would have done.
I mean, in fairness, he did probably try and do that with Mark Wright.
Mark Wright, to be fair, was an outstanding defender. Mark Wright was really, really good. He was just really unfortunate.
Yeah, he was a very, very good defender. He was very Hansen-esque, let's say, in terms of technique and ability to play. He was a captain.
Yeah.
So I think he probably did try to do that, to be honest. Different player, obviously, and you can say that McGrath's better than Wright overall, but I think he definitely tried to do that.
Yeah, to be fair, the Mark Wright transfer is one of the few that I think he actually got right. It's just unfortunate that Mark Wright had injuries and a couple of different issues. Yeah. But I certainly think he got that one right in terms of targeting the right player.
Saunders and Walters were the ones who came in that summer, wasn't it?
Yes.
Beardsley left and Staunton.
Yeah, he shoved both of them out the door. I mean, Saunders, Saunders and Rush didn't work very well for Wales. They constantly wanted to make the same run and play in the same area. And Saunders wasn't as good. Now, maybe his plan at the time was to move Ian Rush on, but it didn't really make sense. Mark Walters, he'd had at Rangers. He'd brought to Rangers. And I think John Barnes had torn his Achilles. So we did need a left winger.
Very soon after that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think Barnes, there was also like the view of moving him into a more central area anyway. So I could understand the Mark Walters one. But again, he's another player that had a lot of injury issues, like hamstring issues at the time. Super exciting player. Great fun to watch. The Saunders one is just a catastrophe, though. I mean, he was so bad for us. And then...
And expensive for the time.
Yeah, I mean, was he a record? I think he was some sort of record fee, wasn't he? 2.9, English record.
British record, yeah.
Do you know, and we're signing... The thing is, we signed him basically to replace Peter Beardsley, who was a significantly better player, was only 3 years. I mean, Beardsley was 30, Saunders was 27, 28. We shove him out the door, but the worst part was we let him go to Everton, and we only got £1 million. So we're down about 1.9 million on the deal overall to get a worse player who's a worse fit with Rush. And then Everton would sell Beardsley however long, 2 years later, and they made a profit on him, which will tell you we undersold significantly. If they got 1.5 million in 93, how did we only get 1 million in 91 for a player of that ilk? Like, that is one of the all-time bonehead transfers. Worse, like the following season, then we spent 2.3 million on Paul Stewart to replace Dean Saunders, who we've deemed not good enough, and sold him to Aston Villa for less than we paid for him.
Yeah. My one that I would have done, and obviously we're talking here with the benefit of hindsight, and that's easy thing to say. But if we take Mark Wright as done, the one that I would have done if he was intent on getting rid of Beardsley was David Platt. Platt playing as basically just off a forward, off rush, basically. Different type of creator to Peter Beardsley, but still scored loads of goals. He left Aston Villa that summer.
And went to Bari.
Yeah, that was the year he went to Italy and played for Bari. And it was an expensive deal. I think that was like 5 million or something, wasn't it? But you're paying 3 million for Saunders. I think it might have been doable for Liverpool to sign Platt for 5, maybe even stretch to a 6. I know that's a massive fee at those times, but it could have been done. I think that was a much more stylistic, similar kind of change.
Well, we signed Dean Saunders, who was an out-and-out striker and scored 17 league goals. David Platt played as an attacking midfielder and scored 19 league goals in that same campaign. So you're getting 19 goals from midfield. That's absolutely value for money at that kind of price. Like, people... I think David Platt historically is massively underrated.
Yeah, me too.
People don't realise, in his last 2 seasons at Villa, 89-90 and 90-91, he played 46 games each season. He only missed 4 league games between the 2 campaigns. He scored 19 league goals in each campaign and scored 45 goals between the 2 years. And like, he'd been scaling up. The season before, he got 7-38 in the league, 14-45 in all competitions. So you're talking about a guy that doesn't get injured and scores goals. You're talking about Frank Lampard, basically, in terms of goals, but didn't take penalties and didn't rely on scabby, deflected goals. David Platt was a phenomenal player. Even when he went to Bari, for a midfielder to go to Italy and in his first season get 15 goals in 35 games for, let's be fair, a mid-table Italian side.
Yeah.
Very, very special. He had a bad time at Juve, but he went to Sampdoria and he was excellent there. He gets 11-38 and 10-34 in his 2 seasons there. And then he comes back to England to play with Arsenal. Obviously, he's not quite the same player. He's 29 at that point, and Arsenal play him deeper than he'd been playing previously because obviously they signed Dennis Bergkamp at the same time, and Bergkamp was the one that played off the striker where Platt kind of wanted to play. But you're looking there at 6 out of 7 seasons of double figures. And if we'd bought him in 91, he was 25. So you would have gotten his entire prime. And I think he would have actually ended up being a better player than what he became, because I feel like when he was leaving Villa, like you go back and you watch some of those Villa teams under Graham Taylor, he was an outstanding footballer. And his ability to, drop into midfield, link play, and then make that off-ball run and just time himself perfectly into the box, and somehow found himself in an acre of space with a plethora of defenders around, but he would have 2 yards in all directions, and his finishing was great. David Platt was an outstanding footballer, and I think that's a great shout. If we'd gotten Platt and Keane at that point, which you could have done, I think you would have got Keane for about $1.5 million and Platt for probably the 5 that Villa got from Barry. We'd have been so much better off. And those two at 20 and 25 would have been foundational pieces for us to build a great team off
of. I don't want to think too much about what we'd have been as a team with Roy Keane in. That's worrisome.
Yeah. And then, of course, there is the famous story about how Eric Cantona was offered to Souness and he didn't want anything to do with him. Christ. And then you've got the next summer he signs Paul Stewart for big money. And then Ruddock and Dix and Nigel Clough. Christ alive.
Loved Cloughie.
One good game. And we forgive him for all the poor games. But, I mean, just no. That Julian Dix. Imagine signing Neil Ruddock and then deciding, who else we need? Julian Dix. That's going to be the left side of our defence. Now, in his defence, he did sign a couple of really good players. Like Rob Jones was a great signing. And if Rob Jones never gets hurt, Gary Neville probably has about 5 England caps. He did sign Stig Inge Bjornaby, who unsurprisingly turned out to be a much better left back for us than Julian Dix. And obviously, like we said, he signed Mark Wright. Mark Walters, I thought, was a decent signing at the time. But Christ alive.
Scales his as well?
Who?
Was John Scales his as
No,
well?
that was Evans. Evans got him. Him and Phil Babb, we signed them one day after the other. And I'll always remember my friend John Paul Cullen, who's no longer with us, very excitedly knocking round to my house to tell me that the Neil Ruddock era of terror is over. We've just signed Phil Babb to go with John Scales, who we signed yesterday. We don't need to play Neil Ruddock anymore. This is great. And Evans played the 3 of them together. And then Phil Babb obviously turned out to not be very good, because in truth, Paul McGrath had been carrying him at that World Cup, and it was little wonder that nobody had really been looking at him before the World Cup. Anyway, let's move on. Right. Hi, Carl and Dave. This is from AT7. I've got a question for a future podcast. What do you think of the 1-2-7 or 2-3-5 formations that Dr. Ian Graham has mentioned wanting to try? I kind of feel like we play something similar enough to that now. With Trent inverting and the left back still being asked to get forward, it feels like at times, not all the time, but at times we go Ibu Virgil, Trent, say Endo when he's the 6, or Alexis when he's 6, and then Curtis sort of drops in on that left side as well. And then it's sort of Dominic Mo, Darwin, Diaz comes a bit narrower, and Robbo kind of plays on the left, or Costas plays on the left. So at times it does feel like we're in a kind of a 2-3-1-4 sort of shape. So I feel like we are doing similar things to this, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think increasingly we don't speak about formations as fixed things anymore. Like it used to very, very much be. You would see a team playing a particular way, a particular formation, and you can see that whether they're defending or attacking. There might be some small alterations with a couple of players outside of that, but by and large, you would see it. And then we got to the sort of point where you would see a team playing one formation defensively and another one in attack sometimes, like we would switch to a three in possession or whatever it was. But I do think that mostly the best teams now don't really rely on such structure in the slightest, and it is much more about position depending on where the ball is on the pitch, what phase of play that we're in, and all the rest of it. So, I mean, it's interesting to think of, having 7 in attack or whatever it is, but it's only at certain points of the game. It's only when certain people have been in the position of the pitch beforehand in the previous play. It's not really. I don't really think it's something you build a team around. Let's put it that way. It's just an opportunistic part of certain matches.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think that is very fair. Right, last question. Zucchino? I think it's Zucchino. With Dave recently listing his top sweepers of all time, would be really interested to hear you both discuss the reasons for the gradual decline of the role from the game in the 80s and 90s, and the reasons it has yet to make a comeback in a widespread fashion, and if it will ever be, and if it ever will in the foreseeable future of the game. So let's start there. When teams moved to back four just became what everybody did because football's a copycat sport. So after sort of the Hitzfeld era, mid to late 90s into the 2000s, and the success that Dortmund and Bayern and the Germans had, and obviously Real played a back three, as did Barca at times in that spell, everybody just sort of moved to a back four because that's what was having success for your Manchester Uniteds, your Arsenals. Barcelona moved to a back four. Real moved to a back four. Obviously, the Italians moved away from the 1-3 back line, or sometimes the 1-4, just into a flat four as well. Kind of a little bit earlier for the Italians, sort of late 80s for them, with Sacchi revolutionizing things. And the sweeper just sort of died off, really. There's also the factor of what type of sweeper do you want, because you look around and the great sweepers historically could have played in midfield. They weren't sort of pacey centre-backs who played as a sweeper. They were almost midfielders who played there. Sciria was a midfielder who got converted in his teens. Beckenbauer was a midfielder who got converted in his teens. Matthias Sammer was a midfielder who got converted in his mid-20s. Lothar Matthäus was a midfielder who got converted in his 30s. So you have to have an elite level of ball-playing ability to play there. And I think teams just preferred to use that player either in front of the defensive line, like the deep line playmaker, which became very much the kind of the in thing for many years, or just to go to a traditional, well, not a traditional, but like a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1. I think it's just the way the game went. Football tends to cycle through formations and tends to be very copycat. So when everybody was playing 4-4-2 or everybody was playing 4-2-3-1, or as now a lot of teams play 4-3-3, it just doesn't leave room for a sweeper. But I do think at some point, some manager will go against the grain and try it. We've seen Mourinho do it a little bit with Cristante. The one I'd love to see tried in that role is Frankie de Jong, who I think has all the tools to be a Matthias Zammer type of sweeper. And I, funnily enough, think that Barcelona team is one player away from being absolutely ideal to play a sweeper style back three with wing backs, Cancelo and Balde, obviously. They get a defensive midfielder and get Gavi back from injury. That's your double pivot with Pedri as the 10 in front. And then you go Lewandowski plus whoever. Ideally, Ansu Fati without the knee injuries. He would be the ideal other forward. But I do think it will come back. I don't think it'll ever be as popular as it was, but I do think some managers will bring it back because it is a different wrinkle that teams don't prepare for because no one else does it. So if you're the only team that does it and the team has only seen you once a year or twice a year, they're not going to be regularly training against that shape, and it might give you a bit of an advantage.
So I think that it's possible we see it, but I don't think it returns as a starting position. I think it's something that'll just be a feature of whether it's the defensive midfielder's game or the playmaker of the team's game, that sort of thing. I don't think it'll be something that they are fixed in as a deep defensive position, and then you start your surges forward later on, that kind of thing. I don't think it'll ever return as a position, let's say, rather than a role, which might occur from time to time. And the reasons for that, I think, are one, that the game's a lot quicker than it was, and the forwards in particular are a lot quicker than it was, and far too many people play offside games and base their defensive tactics around that to really allow another additional, just not a third centre-back, but someone who's actually deeper than them to be in place. It just wouldn't really work against, especially at the minute with wide forwards being so prevalent. It's not just like a centre forward who's there by himself now. It's attacks from all areas, and someone deeper than the rest of the line causes havoc now when there is no sweeper. So I don't think that it'll return that way. Also, while we're getting more and more reliance on technology built into defensive tactics, you are kind of almost wanting to be perfect to hold that line and purposely use VAR and offside technology and all the rest of the stuff that comes in along the way, rather than have an extra covering defender. So I think, if anything, it's more likely to be a return of in possession, alternative outlet and alternative use of space. That will definitely happen again at some point, because it happens all over the pitch, just depending on where the defensive styles are. It's not that far removed from powerhouse midfielders and runners from deep. They were the main things, until we then started seeing much, much more of inverted wide forwards, and they were the ones who created and got the extra space and so on. So it will happen at some point that it's not just a 10 playmaker, and it's not just a defensive midfielder playmaker, but the best space for the best passers who have great athleticism is actually even deeper. So yeah, they might pick up the sweeper position from there, but I do think it will be almost exclusively about build-up play rather than any defensive phases.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, because of that, because teams now use VAR to their advantage, we see Liverpool do it all the time. It means they can, play that higher, more risky line as long as they're kind of locked in. The sweeper makes more sense as a deep lying playmaker, someone that sits in front of the defense rather than behind them. And I think that's, that is basically what happened. The sweeper became your Xabi Alonso's, your Pirlo's, etc., etc. That deep option that can run the game, but isn't sitting behind your defensive line, because teams play a lot higher now. You go back to the 90s and that, teams weren't rocking up and defending the halfway line. Even like the great United team with Stam and Ronnie Johnson, both of whom were really, really fast. They weren't coming to Anfield and defending the halfway line. They were playing in a mid-block. But yet, you fast forward 10 years to Ferdinand and Vidic. Vidic wasn't quick. Ferdinand was, but he wasn't as quick as Stam or Janssen. But they would come and defend the halfway line because that's just how football had evolved. So, yeah, I mean, again, I do think someone will try it. I don't think it'll be in the Premier League. I think if it happens, it's more likely to be in a slightly slower paced league, like Serie A, as an example, which is obviously where Mourinho has tried it. But yeah, I mean, the other thing as well, like so many teams just play one up front, and the problem with that in a sweeper system is either one of your centre backs has to come narrow to take up that striker and man mark him, or your sweeper ends up man marking him, which completely negates the purpose of your sweeper. And then your two actual centre backs are left twiddling their thumbs or dealing with wide forwards, which isn't always ideal. Bonus question. Considering how many decades the sweeper was a mainstay, first being widely adopted around the 1930s, I have my facts straight, you do indeed. Do you foresee any long-lived staple position undergoing a similar long-term demise? Number 10 might be a candidate. Any similar examples of a wholesale phase transition of positions, role, tactics in other sports? Well, if you want an example in another sport, look at how devalued the running back has become in the NFL. Like, you go back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the eras of Jim Brown, Walter Payton, Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, Edgerrin James, Ricky Williams, all those great running backs. And you look at how important and vital they had, Thurman Thomas, how important and vital they were to their teams and the success that they had. And you look at now and how few high-profile running backs there are. You've got Christian McCaffrey. Biggest reason he's high-profile is he catches passes out of the backfield. You've got Derrick Henry, who's probably the only real head-down, fucking pump-the-legs type of running back left who's earning big money. Even, like, Saquon Barkley is an incredible talent, but he's never going to get paid the way he would have 10 years ago, because the running backs just aren't valued the same way. Teams would rather have 3 or 4 guys on $2 and $3 million contracts who they can just put out there and run, rather than paying $15 million a year to a star running back. Like, Adrian Peterson was the last great superstar running back. And we're probably not going to see another one for 15, 20 years, because so much of the focus now is on the quarterback and on your passing game. And teams are building passing games. It started with the Patriots, with the 2 tight ends, Aaron Hernandez, unfortunately, and Gronk, and then kind of smaller receivers and short passing, plus a deep threat. And it took the running back out of the equation, and they would have cheap running backs that they would just get yards when they needed them. That's a prime example of a position just being completely devalued in the same way the sweeper has been. Now, at least it's still used. The fullback is gone because no one wants to put a second player in the backfield who's there just to block. So maybe he's the example of the sweeper. But hello, I'm here to annoy you. I'm here to annoy you into listening to more of me and more of others on EPL Index. We don't just have the Anfield Index stuff. We've got EPL Index as well, which covers the entirety of the Premier League. And we have 3 podcasts and a whole bunch of really good writing on EPLindex.com. The podcasts are my own 2-footed podcast, which is every day at 4 p.m., Monday through Friday, covering the whole league. We have A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. You know Tadiwa, he does Anfield Index. He presents A Tad Predictable before every Premier League match week. And then Kevin DeVries and his crew on the EPL Roundtable, they're every week after the Premier League match week. So make sure you listen to everything we're doing on EPL Index and follow us there on Twitter at EPL Index. Thank you. Bye-bye. The running back has been completely devalued and changed. In football, I think you're right, Carl. I think it's the number 10 position. I don't know if you want to chime in there on the NFL, but I think it is the number 10 position, because the traditional number 10, the kind of free role, the playmaker, the one that doesn't have to do a whole lot of running, those players don't really exist anymore.
No, I mean, we briefly mentioned this just before we came on air. Like, the number 10, the number 10 playmaker is largely sort of gone and largely faded out of the game. But the number 10 position itself, as a focal point and player ahead of midfield but behind forward, that is always changing anyway. That's always been a rotating cast of what the job is in terms of biggest trend. Like we've seen the really, really aggressive ball winning number 10. We've seen the playmaking classic number 10. We've seen the second forward goal scoring running from slightly deeper number 10. We've seen all variations. I don't think that changes because, again, all the idea of football really is when you're coaching and trying to put together a game plan is to put certain players into areas where the space is. And that will continue to be in the center of the pitch at different times against different teams. So I don't think that specific position dies off, but the role will definitely keep on changing depending on, the trend of your particular league in terms of physicality, in terms of pace of the game and all the rest of it. So yeah, that's fine. I don't think we have to look much to a different area of the pitch to see one position which has not completely died out, and it won't ever completely die out, not like sweeper has, but is very, very much reduced to maybe, let's say, 5% at the top end of the game of what it used to be, is the second striker. Like, I'm not talking here about a number 10 who's a forward. I'm talking about the second centre forward. Everybody used to play with two up front at one point, and nobody really does now. Even the teams that play with either split strikers, one of them is really a channel runner, one of them is perhaps a converted wide forward so that they still operate as a wide player, just in slightly more central areas.
And like Griezmann.
Yeah, you don't really have two number 9s anymore. That's which is gone now. So
no, we won't be seeing Sutton and Shearer or Shearer and Ferdinand again anytime soon, I don't think. Which is a shame. Like, it is a shame.
I do think that there's a place for two strikers as a regular thing in the team, but I do think that it's always better to have multiple threats of attack, and that's why we won't see it. It's not because it's old-fashioned, it's because it's not effective anymore. It's not the way you can break down the best teams. And again, we're talking like more about the elite level here rather than, lower down any given national league pyramid. But by and large, when you're playing well set up teams, you need different methods of attack, not two players who are good at the same thing and will be in the same areas, and you approach both of them the same way, which, crossing towards two really strong, good aerial players is a fairly low percentage accuracy way of creating chances, low probability, quality chances. You're not going to score enough goals like that in the modern game, basically. That's the only reason it's not used anymore, not because those players are crap.
I maintain that an Ollie Watkins, Ivan Toney front pairing would be devastating in the Premier League because they're both all-rounders, but they don't have the same exact skill set. Tony's best at dropping deep and involving himself in the build-up, and Watkins is best at running in behind. So that type of pairing, even though they are nominally centre-forward, I think that type of pairing can work. But let's say Ivan Toney and Tammy Abraham, that's not going to work. Or Ivan Toney and Dominic Calvert-Lewin is not going to work. But yeah, it's a shame. So much of football is just about copycat, though. Like, it's, if Guardiola decided tomorrow that what he was going to do was buy Victor Osimhen and he was going to play Osimhen and Haaland up front, I think it'd be hilarious. But I guarantee you within 12 months, loads of clubs would be doing the same thing. Arsenal, for 1,000% certainty, would be doing the same thing because there's so little innovation in the game now and so few managers. And like, we even see it with Jurgen. Like, the style of play that we have now is much closer to what Guardiola does than what Jurgen used to do when he first came to England in terms of the build-up play.
I, for one, am all in for seeing an Eddie Nketiah, Dominic Calvert-Lewin partnership up front every single weekend for Arsenal.
I'd love to see it. What would be the over-under on goals for the season in the league?
What, 15? As a pairing?
As a pairing. 15, 16?
12 12.
Well,
Calvert-Lewin's
Calvert-Lewin is
playing
missing
like
half
11
the
games,
season with
so
injury.
yeah,
He's
playing
going to have a
11
broken
games.
toenail. And I'd love to see it. If Arsenal, Edu, if you hear this, the guy you need to go and get in January, forget Ivan Toney, forget the dreams of Osimhen, forget Dusan Vlahovic, go and get yourself a bit of Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Everton already have Beto, so they don't need to worry about replacing him. Replacement is in-house. They have Chermetti there as well, who's exactly the same type of player. So go and make the bid. You'll get him for 40 million. He's homegrown. You could probably throw Reece Nelson into the deal to bring the price down. They might even take one of the other cast-offs that you had. At some point, Carl, me and you are going to have a look at the Arsenal transfers under Arteta, and we're going to be quite brutal about rating them, because I think there's an underlying theme of money being wasted at Arsenal over the last 3 to 4 years. I think there's a lot of transfers that initially people thought, well, that's been a good deal, but hasn't actually when you look a year or two later. So we'll do that at a different point, maybe at the end of the season when they haven't won the league, and we can mock them safely. While there's still the possibility that they might win something important this year, we best just not do anything silly. But we should now move on to Arsenal, who we play this weekend in the FA Cup. The Gunners are in a little bit of a slump at the moment, I think it's fair to say. You look at recent results, lost to Fulham at the weekend, having gone 1-0 up, lost to West Ham at home, drew at Anfield, and really should have lost. Now, putting aside Martin Odegaard playing basketball, Trent missed an enormous chance that he scores 9 times out of 10, in my opinion. So we should have won that game. Prior to that, they did beat Brighton 2-0, probably their best performance of the season. But it took them a long time to score a goal in that game. 53 minutes, despite dominating from the off. Pascal Gross should have equalised. And if he does, I don't think Arsenal score the second goal, because Kai Havertz's goal came when Brighton were over-committing men forward. Prior to that, they lost at Villa Park. And prior to that, they beat Luton 4-3 with a Declan Rice 97th minute goal, having been 3-2 down, gotten back on level terms, and then having 6 minutes of added time put on. Rice scored 7 minutes into added time because, you got to play till Arsenal score. And they haven't been particularly good, Carl, over this last 6-game run, other than the Brighton game, which, again, they were still a little bit fortunate in. And we've talked about this before. It feels like they're having to play at full capacity and get every little drop that they're capable of right now, and yet they're still struggling to win a lot of these games.
Yeah, and I mean, even before this run started, like you mentioned, the Luton one, the game before that was a win over Wolves. The game before that was a last-minute winner over Brentford. Like, it's not.
And Brentford should have been 2-0 up by the time they scored that goal, because Ramsdale, if you remember, had an absolute nightmare and gifted Brentford chances that they then squandered.
Yeah, it was an odd little run of games that they had around that time. And yet, I was at the Lens game, which was in the middle of those 2 league matches, and they absolutely spanked Lens, and they played really, really well. Lens were terrible, don't get me wrong, but Arsenal played very well, very, very quick on the ball, really good movement. I mean, it's a little bit simplistic, I think, to say that it's away from home that they've struggled, but away from home, they've struggled, right? They've only won 3 on the road since the end of September. So that's a really, really big thing. And one of those was in the Champions League as well. So 2 wins in England since the end of September. That we've spoken about this before, and I gave you the numbers like a few podcasts ago when we were talking possibly about Unai Emery and Aston Villa and all the rest of it. Those numbers away from home don't win you anything. Nothing at all. Like, you're not even in conversation for winning anything if those are your numbers away from home. Premier League wise, I think, what was it, the average I gave you? Just over 9 away wins, something like that, as the average for finishing 4th. So given the point of the season that we're at right now, Arsenal have 5 away wins to their name. So just about above that in terms of overall form. Obviously, their home form's been really good all the way up until very, very recently when West Ham beat them, but not perfect. Like even earlier on in the season, Liverpool might not have been at 100% capacity, but we were still winning all our home games, and Arsenal dropped points twice early on. The games that they've played at home versus the games that they've got to come at home, I'd say are fairly even. First half of the season to second half of the season, like they've already played Man United at home and Man City at home, but they've got to
and
play
Spurs.
Yeah, they've already had the derby as well. So they've got to play Liverpool, and then they have a couple of teams like Newcastle and Chelsea who may or may not be any good at the time that they go to them, which they could improve on home soil, but it's not home points, generally speaking, which win you titles or fourth or whatever it is that you're going for. It's the away form, and they are way, way, way below that at the minute. Have been for 2/3 of this season, probably, if we're talking about specifically away form. And yeah, I think it's probably fair to say that confidence across the board will be a little low at the moment, and probably whether it's a good time to play them or not, I think is largely irrelevant, because it could just be a different team comes out to play the FA Cup and people are ready to take their chance and all that kind of crap, and that could go for both teams. But I think it's a fair enough time to play them, to be perfectly honest, because it is going to be a case of either you take the strongest players out and rotate and rest them, or they play the strongest players, but who are not in a great shape of mind at the minute. 1 win from 5 across all competitions, 6, across all competitions is not going to be conducive to anyone thinking, this is our competition this year.
So you mentioned Arsenal have won 5 away games in the league this season. Here's who they've beaten. Everton, who've been an abomination at home this season. 3 wins, 1 draw, and 6 defeats. Crystal Palace, 2 wins at home all season, 3 draws, 5 defeats. Brentford, 3 wins at home all season. Brentford have won 1 of their last 8 games and lost the other 7, and Arsenal beat them in that run. We beat them we were the first team they lost to. Arsenal then, they lost to Arsenal next. Luton Town, well, they're in the bottom 3. And Bournemouth, who were also in the bottom 3 at that time, might even have been bottom or second from bottom at that time. They haven't beaten anybody decent away from home. They haven't beaten anybody who's not in the bottom 6. Crystal Palace are 7th from bottom now. I believe they're in the bottom 6. Regardless, they haven't beaten anyone who, at that time of win, was higher than 14th away from home. I said to you, I don't know if you remember this, you might do. Before the season, we did a podcast where we did one hot take for each team. And I said to you, mine for Arsenal is that they missed top 4. And I was half joking. But if I look at the league table, Carl, they're 4th. They're 1 point ahead of Spurs. And Spurs have had no Maddison for weeks. No Van de Ven for weeks. Romero has missed a bunch of games. Basuma has missed a bunch of games. Sarr has missed a bunch of games. So they've had much more bad luck with injuries and suspensions and whatever else than Arsenal have. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that if Spurs hadn't lost James Maddison and Mickey Van de Ven for long term, what will be 3 months by the time they come back, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Spurs would be ahead of Arsenal right now. So they could well be 5th at this stage of the season. Now, they'll point and say, oh, well, we're only 5 points off top, and that's fair. That is fair. But you're only 1 point off 5th. And the team in 5th have had a lot of bad luck with injuries. Whereas I look at the Arsenal team, you've had whoever your first choice goalkeeper was going to be for all bar 1 game when Raya couldn't play against Brentford, because Ramsdale was first choice to begin the season. William Saliba's played every game. Ben White has played 19. Gabriel has played 18. Zinchenko's played 18. So you've had very little disruption to your back line in terms of injuries. Your first choice midfield is clearly Martin Odegaard, and he's missed 3 games. Declan Rice, he's played every game. And Kai Havertz, who you bought to play left side of the midfield, he's missed 1 game. He was suspended for 1 game. And then in attack, Bukayo Saka, he's played 19 games. Martinelli's played 18 games. Gabriel Jesus is the only Arsenal player starting 11 to be unavailable for 4 or more games. And they'll point at Partey, but you signed Declan Rice to replace Partey. And you can't tell me that Declan Rice is the best defensive midfielder in the world and then tell me that you're missing Thomas Partey. You cannot have both of those arguments. Now, you are missing Thomas Partey, but your manager did sign an inferior defensive midfielder to replace him. That is a fact. They'll point at Tomiyasu being out. Again, where does he play? Does he play left back instead of the £35 million left back? Or instead of the 50 million centre back that your manager plays at right back because he wasn't good enough at centre back? Where does he play? Or is he just a squad player? Jurrien Timber is the one you can make a real argument for. But again, you've got a 35 million left back and a £50 million player at right back. I don't want to hear that you've been missing Jurrien Timber or Tomiyasu or Partey. You've had your expensive, quote-unquote, best in the league players in those positions that you have loaded and spent all the last season loading. They've had really, really good fortune with injuries this season and last.
Yeah, last season especially, for sure. The other thing I would say about Arsenal, because like people might obviously be looking at us saying like Arsenal have won 5 away from home, Liverpool have won 5 away from home, right? So that's fair to point out. But the differences here is twofold, really. First of all, we've only lost 1, and we know the circumstance that we had. We were down to 9 men. It was the 95th, 6 minutes, whatever it was, and it was an unfortunate own goal. Arsenal have lost 3 times. So straight away, you're ahead of them just by virtue of not losing as often as they do. Secondly, as we just mentioned before, they were not perfect at home right from the start of the season. Liverpool were up until very, very recently. And thirdly, Arsenal are dropping points now, not at the start of the season. They're losing games now away from home, not at the start of the season. We started pretty slow, fair enough. And then we had a couple of draws like the Brighton, Man City, Luton was the other one there, which was in a row. But Arsenal have just now fallen off at a time where you need to be picking up points on a regular basis. Their away form, they won 3, didn't win 2. Won 2, didn't win 3. It's very, very different heading into the second half of the season, losing momentum and form, than it is heading into the second half of the season, knowing you've improved from where you were at the start of the year, even if you didn't win every single game. Like, even just like the next few away games alone, you'd still fancy Liverpool to go and win the majority of them, with obviously against Arsenal being the one exception. Whereas we finish up, I think, to be honest, there's only really 1 away game there of our last 6 that I look at, 7, and think, yeah, it'll be difficult. Like, we've got the derby, but that's itself, and I still expect us to win that. It's Man United away, just because of how Liverpool sometimes play against Man United.
Not Villa away?
Villa away on the final day, if they're still in the running for something, fair enough. I just don't expect them to be, and I've told you that before.
Yeah, that's fair, because it's so late.
Whereas Arsenal finish away from home against Man City, Brighton, both difficult games. Wolves, which may or may not be, could turn out by that.
They've been good at home this year.
Yeah, but it could, by that point of the season, turn out to be routine.
Yeah,
but
true.
The last 2 away games, away to Spurs and away to Man United.
Yeah.
It's a really, really difficult thing to go through there.
If you look at their away games left, Forest beat them last season. And Forest are currently on the new manager bounce. So that might have run out by the time that game comes around. But Forest are decent at home. Then they have to go and play at West Ham, who've just beaten them. Then they go Burnley, they'll win that. They go Sheffield United, they win that. But then, like you said, that last run of 5 away, City, Brighton, Wolves, Spurs, United, they could lose any of them. They could lose all of them. very easily. And like you said, with us, we have Bournemouth. We should win that. Then we go to Arsenal. That's a tough one, obviously. We go to Brentford. We should win that. We've got Forest. Again, fair is fair. That'll be tough. They beat us there last season too. Then we go Everton. Then we go United. Then Fulham. West Ham will be tough, but we play them in a more favourable time of the season than Arsenal do. And then Villa. But the thing is, we've only won 5 away from home, but look at who we beat. Now, again, we've beaten some of the poor teams. We beat Sheffield United, we beat Crystal Palace, we beat Burnley. But we beat Wolves. Wolves at home this season have beaten Manchester City. They've drawn with Villa. They've drawn with Newcastle. They've beaten Spurs. They've beaten Chelsea. And they wiped the floor with Everton last time out. And Everton have been playing quite well of late. So Wolves have been good at home. And yet we went there, survived an absolute onslaught in the first half, and then wiped the floor with them second half. And we beat Newcastle. And I know Newcastle lost to Forest in the last home game. But when we beat Newcastle, they were a different kettle of fish than they are right now. Their legs hadn't gone from underneath them when we went there. And you look at their home results, they hammered Villa, they beat Brentford, they beat Burnley, they hammered Palace, they beat Arsenal, they hammered Chelsea, they beat United, and they beat Fulham. The only team to have gone there this season prior to Forest and got anything was us. So I would mark our 2 away wins against them and Wolves down as far more impressive than anything Arsenal have done away from home in the league this season.
But for this game, we play them at home. Them at home.
Yeah, they're at home at the Emirates. They're going to be looking to get themselves back into form. They will realise that the chances of them winning the league are small. There's a chance, but it's a small chance. And frankly, the chance of us winning the league it's bigger because we're 5 points ahead of them, but it's still not a big chance because there's still that Manchester City-shaped shadow looming over all of it. And in all likelihood, it's City's title to lose. As long as Guardiola is there, that's pretty much going to be how I view it.
Yeah.
But we have a bit better chance of winning that competition than they do. I wouldn't view them as having a big chance of winning the European Cup either. They have a chance because they're still in it. But again, Manchester City, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, etc., etc., etc. It's a small chance of winning it. But as you said the last day, because we're facing each other in this round of the FA Cup, you get through here, you might not play another Premier League team or, top half Premier League team until a semi-final, or maybe a final if you get a Manchester United type of draw. So this could be their opportunity to win some silverware. And you'd have to imagine that with £620 million spent since after they last won silverware, which was that FA Cup Arteta won in his first kind of half season in charge. And then he started to spend money, and they've won nothing since they started to spend money. At some point, the owners are going to say, we'd like a little bit of return here. We'd like something. It's all well and good to say, we got into the top 4 in one season of the 3 full seasons you've had. But that doesn't put silverware in the trophy room. We want silverware. That's what matters to us. So show us something. The FA Cup is probably their best chance to win something this season, especially if they knock off one of the major contenders in ourselves. That really only leaves them looking at, an away game at Villa or Man City home or away, as we wouldn't really fancy this in the next round. I think anybody else, other than maybe a trip to Spurs, they probably wouldn't want that. But anything else, I think they'd look at and go, yeah, we fancy that. So if they get through against us, this could be a real opportunity for them to add some silverware. Now, 620 million should equate to more than an FA Cup, but it's still an FA Cup. It's still real silverware. It's still something tangible. They have to really, I think they have to go full strength, go all out in this, because they don't have a League Cup game in the week. So they've got this game and then a week off until the next 2 weeks off until the next Premier League game. They can go full bore.
Yeah, I agree. I don't expect them to go anything other than, like, there may be a couple of rotations, kind of the same way as we sometimes think that Klopp will put out, let's say, a middle-of-the-road team, like maybe 2 alterations, one in the forward line, one in the defensive line, or something like that. But by and large, I do think that it'll be a full team. I also think that the Arteta thing, in terms of some return, might influence him to play the strongest possible side. He might not feel that, not that he's under pressure right now, but he might not just want to throw away one opportunity of winning a trophy in the way that he might do if, let's say, Arsenal were second in the league, or even more favourable sort of tie in Europe or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they were in the position we're in the league, I do think he might consider going with a lesser team. If they were, 3 points clear, I do think he might go, you know what, I'm just going to keep players. I'm going to keep them fresh. And we're just going to motor towards that title and try and keep that gap on Man City. 5 points at the moment with them having a game in hand. It's still a 2-point lead, regardless of what happens in their game in hand. Like you said, they've got Porto in the Champions League, which, could be tough. They got knocked out of the Europa League last year by Sporting Lisbon, so, you never know. Going into this game, they have a doubt over Zinchenko, and I don't know if they'll risk him, but they might have to, because Tomiyasu's gone to AFCON. Timber probably done for the season with the ACL. I mean, it would be a surprise if he comes back this season, but maybe he'll be back around April. Either way, he's out for this one. El Neni's gone to AFCON with Egypt. Thomas Partey bizarrely was left out of the Ghana squad, despite the fact he's meant to be back in the next couple of weeks. And Fabio Vieira is out as well. I mean, he's been a nothing player for them, so it's not really much of a blow. The Zinchenko one could be interesting, though, because if he's out, do they go with Jakub Kivor at left back? Because we saw that recently, and it didn't look good. He looks very, very uncomfortable in that role. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best idea to try that again. Like, Fulham got a lot of joy targeting him down that side, and he had to be hauled off and replaced by Tomiyasu, but now Tomiyasu's gone away. I don't know what they'll do. Maybe they could try Gabriel at left back and play Kivor as a centre back. Might work a little bit better because Gabriel's a little bit quicker. But then you're breaking up an established central defensive partnership for one that doesn't have many minutes together. So what do you think he'll do defensively? And more importantly, might he just give Aaron Ramsdale the FA Cup to try and kind of soothe him over? Because there's rumours he's unhappy and would like to leave. But obviously they can't let him leave because you've got to go and find another goalkeeper then. And if Raya got hurt, they'd be in a bad position.
Well, I mean, if Raya got hurt now, they'd be in a bad position because they'd have to play Aaron Ramsdale in goal. So, sure.
That's true. That is true. It's a fair point.
Let's say that, yes, they'll give Ramsdale the game. I imagine they will. I think that's, fair as well, to be perfectly honest, regardless of who I think is a decent keeper or not. If you sign 2 goalkeepers and tell them you're both going to be first choice and you basically have to fight it out, well, obviously opportunities are a requirement to give to one who's not playing every single week. So, yes, Ramsdale has to start this one, really, I think, unless he's already in talks over a move. That's the only real caveat I would say there. I think they just play Kiwior left back again, but the 3 alternatives, I suppose there are. One is to switch Ben White over and play there, and Kiwior either right side or someone else plays right back. They may
The rare Cedric Soares appearance?
I mean, that's one possibility. I suppose they have a few things they could do. Just trying to see if any younger players have played. I don't really think they have done.
No, Arteta doesn't like young players other than Bukayo Saka and Martinelli.
So the other two things that they could do, one is, again, one would necessitate White playing probably from the left. You can put Reece Nelson in for some football minutes and play him right back. Similar sort of lines, you can move to a back three and just play Kiwior in the centre and then find yourself another person to play left wing back. Or Bukayo Saka goes in there just for the game and fills in at left back for them, obviously, as he has done loads and loads of times before. You would imagine that's the least likely course of action, simply because if you're going to play Saka and give him minutes in the cup where he's already playing loads of minutes elsewhere, you want him in a position of most influence, which is obviously going to remain in the front line. So I think that's less likely than anything else, but just to mention it as a box ticked off.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he has played there. When he first broke into the Arsenal team, he played there quite a bit. I think if they were going to a back three, you could potentially see Nelson and Saka as wing backs, although I don't know what you'd do. You could play Ben White in the midfield too with Rice to give you a little bit of solidity in front of your back three. So your wing backs could basically be wingers. And then you could play Odegaard as a 10 behind Martinelli and Jesus and basically have a defensive 5 and an attacking 5. And that is something I wouldn't be surprised if he tried at some point. I do actually think Ben White could play that midfield role next to Rice in a similar kind of, John Stones type of way. Because he's played in midfield before for both Leeds and Brighton. And he is good on the ball, to his credit. So that could be an interesting little wrinkle that he could try. I don't think he'd try it against us. I think he'd be more likely to try it against, weaker opposition. But who knows? I mean, he can be a little bit arrogant with his team selections, as we're seeing with the Odegaard, Rice, Havertz midfield three. But let's assume he goes Kiwior at left back, same back line that played against Fulham. White, Saliba, Gabriel, Kiwior in front of Ramsdale. In midfield, then, I expect him to once again go Odegaard, Rice, Havertz. The only potential change he could make is maybe bringing Jorginho in as the 6 and moving Rice to that left-sided role, which I do think actually improves the balance of their midfield and helps them in their build-up because Rice is limited in terms of his passing ability. I don't care what his progressive passing numbers suggest. I know what I see, and he's not a good progressive passer. And then the front three, I expect it to be Saka, Jesus, and Martinelli, which, on paper is a very strong front three, but this season, Saka's been good. Not great, not as good as he was last season, but good. But Jesus and Martinelli, Carl, especially Martinelli, they're having very troubling campaigns. Martinelli he doesn't look anywhere close to the player he was last year. And last year, we talked about it. He looked like a guy that was ready to step up and become one of the kind of prominent players in world football in his position. But he doesn't seem to have taken that next step. And what concerns me when I watch him is there's no change of pace with him. Everything is a million miles an hour. He receives the ball and he's immediately in this frenetic, frantic style. And everything becomes a little too rushed and a little bit too heavy. And we see it a lot where...
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, an Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes, and games consoles. Visit libertyshield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
The ball is getting slipped into him, and you're thinking, right, one touch out of your feet and get your shot away. But because he's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, the touch is heavy, and he's ending up shooting from bad angles. Whereas last season, the touch was smooth and it was right into his path, and he was getting his shot away and scoring goals. Is it a tactical thing? Is it an individual thing? What is going on, do you think, with him in particular, but also Jesus, who, like, last season obviously wasn't scoring a huge amount of goals, but he was so impressive in his overall play. And this season, that's gone away. Are teams figuring them out? What is it?
I think with Jesus, it's a little bit down to the injuries as well. Like, he had a couple last year. He's had a few interruption ones this year, and it's quite difficult for a player like that who functions so much on sort of link play, second line approach. First touch has obviously got to be really good with him. All of that is hard to do if you haven't got any rhythm, or if the rhythm is continually broken up. Goal scoring, I don't think, is ever really his primary thing anyway. And I don't think Arsenal miss that when the others are playing really well. But I think the Jesus lack of goals and lack of really consistent work in the penalty box is sort of magnified by the fact that Martinelli, like you said, is having a really, I actually think he's been poor in quite a lot of games this season, to be honest. I don't think Martinelli starts against us. I think Trossard starts that one. Martinelli, I think, I'm not really worried about it at this point, because I think it's just, he's 22 years old. He was 21 last year and he had a great campaign, but young players very, very rarely do that season after season after season at this stage of their career. So I think probably just a poor spell. It's quite a long poor spell. It's definitely not good, but I wouldn't be particularly concerned by it for the longer term. The one thing from a tactical perspective I would say is that most of the really, really good forwards that we see around, even the wide forwards now, and at most of the other teams at the top end of the Premier League, there are not loads of forwards who just play one role, one position all the time. Like, even like Salah, we just spoke about it earlier, he plays centrally quite a lot. He'll go in behind the centre forward late on in matches quite a lot. Any of our other forwards basically play a minimum of two roles. Some of them play all three across the front line. Some of them, like Gakpo, play in midfield. You'll get the same for everybody bar, Haaland, throughout most of the top generic, let's say, not the current, but the top six in the Premier League. Like, most of them have multiple roles. Martinelli is never used outside left wing. Like, we know he can play centre forward, but how long ago was it that you last saw him start a game and played a full 90 there? It's been absolutely ages. He has one role in the team: start wide, pick the ball up, stretch play, and beat a man. And then once you get in towards the corner of the penalty box, then it depends on where he is, what he does, whether it's a shot or a take on, a cutback, that kind of thing. But he basically has the very, very same function game after game after game after game. I don't know whether that is an impacting thing on when it's not going well. He has nothing else to offer at this moment in time, or he's restricted to not offering too much else. But I don't think it helps him, let's put it that way. I don't know if it's actively, I don't want to say destroying him. Obviously, that's way too heavy, but it might not be having an overall negative influence on him, but it's definitely not helping him. That's the only thing I would say. Like, give him a run of games at either centre forward or even right wing, just as an outside player, and maybe he does something different, which brings a bit of form back, which brings a bit of confidence back, which, knock-on effect of that kind of stuff. Or use him for 3 or 4 weeks as an impact sub and just use him in the last 15 minutes of matches. So if he is doing everything at 100 miles an hour, maybe he hasn't got full control of it, but maybe the tired opposition defences can't contain him either, and he gets a goal or an assist that way, and confidence restores that way, etc. I do think that there needs to be a different approach, but you're looking at a player out of all of Arsenal's squad in the Premier League this season. He's 8th. And when one of them's the keeper, they're both centre-back partnerships. Your captain, Bukayo Saka, and the new signing Declan Rice, those are the only players above him. So he's right in there as a guy who's on the pitch all the time, doing the exact same role, 17 starts and 1 sub appearance.
Yeah.
I just think he's in a bit of a rut, which is normal with young players, but it is being magnified because of what's expected from him and from Arsenal.
Yeah, well, he set the bar for himself last season. And I think he is missing Granit Xhaka enormously. And look, as a straight-up footballer, I think Kai Havertz is a better footballer than Granit Xhaka, without question. Declan Rice is clearly a better footballer than Granit Xhaka. But Xhaka was outstanding last season up until they went to Anfield and he lost the head, and then it all kind of fell apart for them. But what Xhaka did last season that was so vital to them was the simple things. The little pass between the centre-back and the right-back for Martinelli to run in behind onto. The 1-2 with Martinelli, where Martinelli could fake infield, feed Xhaka, who'd literally just act as a wall and bounce it back to him through that gap, and he was in. Havertz doesn't do that. Rice, when he plays there, doesn't do that. Doesn't have the technical ability to do it. I think they're missing Xhaka a huge amount. And I do think they're missing Partey, because Thomas Partey is very good defensively, but what he really brought to them was his ability to develop play from deep. And Rice doesn't have that. So because Rice doesn't have it, Martin Odegaard is having to drop quite a lot further back to receive the ball. And rather than now receiving it 15 yards into the opposition half from Thomas Partey, he's receiving it 15 yards into his own half from William Saliba or from Ben White. And he's having to start play deeper. And that's causing them trouble in terms of getting into their half-field attack. They have quite a few automations, things that they do over and over and over again. That little triangle they play with Odegaard, Saka, and Ben White, that was money for them last season. Absolute gold in terms of creating chances for them. This season, you're still seeing the triangle, but it's 15, 20 yards deeper. It's not in the same threatening areas because they're struggling to get into those final third areas because the progression from deep isn't there. And I said this to you a few weeks ago. Rice is a better player than Xhaka. He's not a better six than Partey. And he's not playing as well, or he's not playing better than Xhaka did last year. I think they spent 170 million on their midfield and downgraded it. As a pair, as a functional pair, I would rather have Partey and Xhaka and what they give me together than Havertz and Rice in a midfield pairing. Now, again, Rice is the left-sided 8 and Havertz in a different role. I'm not sure where that would be other than maybe number 9. That, to me, is more valuable than what we're seeing with Havertz in midfield. But I just think last year you looked at that midfield and you looked at the balance of it and you looked at the 3 individual roles and each of them were fitting perfectly into their role, on and off the ball. And this season, I don't think any of them are functioning as well as they could be. Rice, because I think he's been played in the wrong position. Odegaard, because he's having to come so much deeper. And Havertz, he just isn't a midfielder. And they don't have that 6 who can take the ball off the centre-backs and get them into their play. They don't have anybody doing that role for them. Jorginho's done it once or twice. Partey, if and when he comes back, he can do it. But I still don't think that will... I think that will help Odegaard. I think it will help Saka. I think it will help Ben White. And I think it will help Jesus. I don't think it will help Martinelli as much because I think he needs that Xhaka type who's going to basically be primarily a creator for him through the simplicity of, I'm going to play this ball between centre-back and right-back. You're going to run in behind and then you're in. this is what I'm saying earlier. I look at a lot of the players that they've signed under Arteta, and there's a lot of good players, no question. But I don't know if he's done a very good job at profiling them and fitting them in, because again, like 170 million, and there's no question Rice is better as an 8 than a 6, and Havertz just isn't a midfielder, and you can see it when he plays. He scored a few goals recently, but the performances aren't any better. He still looks completely lost out of possession, and he doesn't offer anything in terms of the build-up because he's not helping Martinelli.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Arteta got it slightly wrong in the summer, and I don't want to linger on it because, like you say, we're going to do a separate Arsenal podcast related to transfers, not just for this summer, but for a longer period of time. But I do think that there were, even if the right decisions, you can say, were made to sign people, I think they had odd ideas of how to group them all together, and the knock-on effect I don't think has been helpful at all, and especially when you consider future obligations with the goalkeeper and so on and so forth. So I think it's an interesting thing that Arsenal have done, but I didn't really see how it was meant to work, and I don't think it has done so far. But obviously that's not to say that it won't cost 90 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're 10 points worse off than they were this time last season, or 8 points maybe it is after 20 games. Like, that's not nothing. On to Liverpool then, quickly, because we are well over time. You mentioned the last time we talked about this game that you think Jurgen will go strong because we have this game, then we have Fulham in the week, and that might be one that we could maybe rest 1 or 2 for, even though it's a cup semi-final. It is Fulham and it is at home. And then we don't play again for 11 days. Or he could go full strength in both, knowing he then has an 11-day window. So are you expecting Ali, Trent, Ibu, Virgil, and Joe? That's goalkeeper defence, yeah?
I think so. I do wonder whether Konate still gets this game or Kwanzaa comes in, because then we want Konate for Fulham. And at the moment, obviously, we seem to be being quite careful with him. But apart from that, yeah, the rest are the same.
I think he'll go Ibu this one, and maybe Kwanzaa is the change then for Fulham, because they don't have... Fulham don't have real pace in their attack. So I think that one's maybe a slightly easier game for Kwanzaa to come in for.
Yep, fair enough.
Midfield, then, we know that Endo is gone to the Asian Cup. We're also without Stefan Bajcetic, Thiago Alcantara, and probably Dominic Szoboszlai in midfield. So Alexis comes in as the 6. Curtis starts as one of the 8s. So the questions here now are, who's the other 8? And what does the front 3 look like without Salah? So the possibilities, he could play Gakpo as an 8, which he's done multiple times this season. He could play Gravenberch, who I don't think warrants to start, but Jurgen keeps going to him. He could play Harvey Elliott in midfield. And if he does, then that kind of takes one player out of the front 3 options, because I do think Harvey is probably an option to play right side of the front 3 when Dominic is back and Mo is still away. Yeah. What do you think he'll do? What would you do, and what do you think he'll do?
So Harvey Elliott deserves to be in the team, unlike some of the people who will be playing. Let's put it that way. Like, some people will play because they have to be playing because of numbers. Elliott deserves to be in the 11 for this game. I would be sticking with what I said last week and saying to Harvey Elliott, you're starting against Arsenal and against Fulham, the 2 cup games, but they're 2 important cup games. So you're getting both of them, and they're in the same position. And it's going to be to see if you can fill the Salah void. And it's literally a 1 in for one who's gone in that role, and we can box it off and not worry about it too much if he performs well. So I'd be playing him in the front line, to be honest.
Yeah, fair. He was brilliant against West Ham in that role.
Yeah, I just think he deserves it. So I think would also make it easier for not having other players have to, knock on, change their roles and all the rest of it. If we just take out Salah, put in Elliott, obviously it's not going to be the same kind of game or same output level, but there are similarities there in terms of Elliott loves to shoot, loves to cut in, can pick up the ball, dovetails well in that little channel. and he can create as well. He's got a decent delivery on him and so on. So I'm happy to just do that. I also think that Jota starts this game. I think we'll be trying to get him back up to speed because none of the other three have been consistent enough.
But he does love a game against Arsenal, doesn't he?
He loves playing Arsenal. He also loves cup games against Arsenal as well. Let's remember that. So I think starting Jota centre forward maybe for this game. Maybe that is slightly wrong thing to do because Gabriel and Saliba could obviously monster him physically.
I would start Darwin as the 9 because I think we played right into their hands from their defensive point of view in the league game by not putting a physical runner in behind up against Saliba. I think the Gakpo is a dream opponent for Saliba because he's not physical, he's not good in the air, he's not going to come up man and man against me, and he's not going to run in behind. You were at that Lens game. Lens were dreadful, and El Yawahi still ran William Saliba all over the place on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
That's how you get at William Saliba, with pace and power and runs in behind. So he doesn't like defending facing his own goal. I would play Jota left side and Darwin through the middle with Elliott right side.
Yeah, I'm less of a fan of Jota from the left, but one, it's a cup game, and two, he has looked much sharper and a bit more able to carry the ball and first touch a bit better. So, and you can also obviously swap the mid game on and off as you need to, so it's not that much of a big deal. All right, let's do that then. Let's go Nunes through the middle, Jota left, Elliott right side, and therefore I'll go with Gravenberch again on the right side of midfield.
My question then on that is, if we do that, we don't have a midfielder then on the bench, a senior midfielder. So does it make more sense to start Gakpo as the 8 or Trent as the 8 and at least have a midfielder on the bench should we need to change?
I actually would be up for starting Trent in midfield on this game and going him against Rice, basically, because I think Jorginho starts. I don't think it's Rice, Havertz, Odegaard. I think Jorginho starts. So then it would be, that channel would be Trent against Rice. I'd be up for letting that happen, to be honest.
And get Rice chasing back a lot more as well.
Not just that, but maybe getting Trent chasing back a lot, because if he wants to play in midfield for England, this is the guy he needs to go up against and say, I'm as good as he is.
Yeah, that's fair. So you go Gomez back to right back. And then the question is left back. Now,
I think leave Gomez left back and start Bradley right back, to be honest.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind that. I don't love it, but I don't mind it.
I think the only alternative there is we brought back Owen Beck, didn't we? So if he's in much better shape, I've no idea how he was playing, but he was
playing really well for Dundee. Really well.
But we've seen players come back from playing really, really well in the Premiership before and never be seen of again. So I'm not going to judge anything by that. Let's let the, whatever better option it is, Conor Bradley, who's had a couple of games recently, or Owen Beck, who's had a lot of games recently at a lower level, whichever one of those two is the right choice, let's say, or the better performer at the minute, they start and Gomez the other one.
Yeah, that's fair. That would be preferable to me. Owen Beck has been playing really well, but it is a lower level of standard. It is the equivalent of excuse me. It is the equivalent of playing in League One. Like, that's the standard in Scotland. But I mean, Conor Bradley, what we've seen of him for the most part is him at Bolton, which is League One. And his games for Liverpool have been a little bit of a mixed bag. So either one of them, Gomez the other side, I would probably prefer to play Conor Bradley purely because that's up against an out-of-form Martinelli rather than throwing Owen Beck straight in against Bukayo Saka. Do you know, that's what it would come down to for me.
Yeah, that's fair. That's probably fair. And look, they haven't tended to play the full 90 anyway, the young fullbacks who have been starting recently, so there may be a change there anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's just, I want to have a senior midfielder on the bench. We know if we start Gravenberch, he's coming off on 60. because there's nothing. He just doesn't have 90 in his legs for whatever reason. And you've got nobody to bring on, no midfielder to bring on. If you know you have to bring him off on 60, 65, I'd rather start with somebody else, be it Trent, even Cody, and then have Gravenberch to bring on where you can get 30, hopefully good minutes out of him.
Yeah.
Look, there's always the option in game of moving Harvey back into midfield and bringing Diaz on right wing or something. So you have different options there. But yeah, I think this could be a good game. I think if we go strong and if we can win this game, even though it's not the league, I still think it could have a knock-on effect in the league because we go there in the league in 3 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time?
Yeah.
So if we can beat them there in this game, that might just give us a little bit of a mental edge to go there in the league in a couple of weeks and get a result. Not saying we beat them again, but go there and even get a draw. A draw away to Arsenal in the league, I will take as a good result. And I think if we could have a bit of a psychological edge over them, it would help. So what's your prediction for this one?
I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Liverpool win.
That was my prediction. Damn it. I'm just going to copy and I'm going to go 2-1 as well. I'm going to say 2-1. Jota scores because, it's Jota, it's Arsenal, it's a cup game. And I think Darwin scores. I think Darwin can have his way with William Saliba if we put him up against him. And look, it could be that we play him on the left with Jota through the middle and Darwin just makes those central breaking runs and gets on the end of a clipped cross from Trent or whatever it is, a slide ball from Harvey and gets himself a goal. Yeah, 2-1. Right. This has been a long podcast. Is there anything you want to plug before we go?
I will, over the next few days, have an AFCON piece coming out starring Mr. Salah. You may have heard of him. Beyond that, let's just see how the weekend goes.
Cool. There we go. We'll be back next week to preview Fulham, and then we'll do something else as well, given we have no Premier League game and no game for a little bit of time after the Fulham game. So we'll get some stuff done. I think actually on that Fulham one, Carl, if you can familiarise yourself with the FIFA Pro squad that was put together this week, and I'd like to go through and dissect that with you, because there's one or two questionable inclusions and one or two very questionable exclusions that I think we should talk about. So thank you for listening, folks. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.
Sports Social Podcast Network.